again, Marco Severino from Flow Design Architects in another video to go over major topics that are important for people to know out there, either designers, architects, people in general within our community. And so if you haven't subscribed to our channel, please do so we can see that people are enjoying what we are creating here at Flow Design. So in the previous videos, if you haven't looked at the videos, we talked about several topics regarding Windows and the basics of Windows, and we talk about the importance of Windows, the types of Windows. So if you haven't looked at that video, please go to our playlist and go back to it so you can get to speed with what we are talking about. So today we're gonna focus and finalize this video series talking about energy efficiency, core requirements, and how Windows influence the space. So we're gonna talk about those topics briefly in a way that kind of help people to understand the concepts. So once again, if you haven't looked at the previous videos, please go back to a playlist and get familiar with what we're talking about. So going back to Windows, energy efficiency of the window. Nowadays we're talking about, the new energy code, how Windows play a key component of the energy efficiency of your envelope. So very important, Windows play a very big factor, because the moment you create an opening within a wall assembly, you are affecting that energy efficiency. And having high efficiency windows are a key component to maintain that envelope, to create a space that feels comfortable for people to use. So energy efficiency plays a huge factor within your project, your home, your business. But what do we mean when we say energy efficiency? There are two components within Windows that play a big factor: the U factor and the SHGC, which we're gonna go into detail in a second. The U factor is how well can the window keep heat at your home? How well can that window keep that heat? So the lower the number, the better. So because here in New England, you want to maintain that heat within your home. And if you don't know where to find that U factor, make sure you look at, when you buy a window, typically the manufacturers have a tag. They have a tag right at the bottom that says, the size of the window, who the manufacturer is, and then they tell you the U factor for that window. Now, make sure you follow up with your architect and your professional about what is the minimum requirement U factor at this time. Now, we're creating this video on June of 2023, but the energy code will potentially change in about, in about another year or so. So make sure you get familiar and you follow up and you reach out to the professionals to know what is my minimum U factor in my area. And that U factor can vary depending on your climate zone within the United States. So make sure you really ask those important questions. What is my minimum U factor? Another big component of energy efficiency within Windows is the solar heat gain coefficient. And what does that mean? Is how well the window keeps the heat out. And this one is one that the lower the number, the less heat the window allows to enter the space. In this one, it's very important because if you are in New England, you actually, in the winter time, if you have a south-facing facade, and you have, let's say, trees that allow the sun to penetrate your space in the winter months, you want to make sure that your window allows that heat to enter. You don't want to block the heat because you want to gain more heat in the winter months, versus if you live in Florida and you get heat, 24/7, all times of the year. You want to make sure that you are blocking some of that heat gain within that window. So very important, depending on where you are located within the United States and the world, to understand the solar heat gain coefficient of that window. So once again, very important topics for people that are investing in properties, for people that are, buy a rental home and they want to make sure, like, oh my God, like Marcos, I have a south-facing facade. What do you recommend within that wall assembly? What kind of window should I place? So very important that you pay attention to the U factor and the solar heat gain coefficient of that window. Another topic that we want to talk about within that energy efficiency is the glass, the type of glass that you use, the amount of layers or panels within your window itself. Back in the day, a single panel used to be sufficient. And something that we did realize is, like, single panel is not really a very energy efficiency window. So nowadays we're seeing a lot of, two panel glass windows, which actually create an air gap in between the panels, which makes it a more energy efficiency type of window. And then we can see that if you go to a triple glaze panel, you increase that energy efficiency, but also you increase the cost for this. So make sure you follow up with your window manufacturer. Try to balance out, what type of window is appropriate for that application. Not all windows are appropriate, depending on what you are trying to obtain within that project. So very, very important that you pay attention of, the amount of glaze panels that the window manufacturer are providing within that window, and how that relates to cost and energy efficiency within what you're trying to come across within your project. So very important. Now that we talk a lot about energy efficiency, let's talk about a little bit about core requirements regarding windows. Sometimes people think that we as designers, we just place windows where we think is appropriate. I feel like putting a window here. I'm putting a window there. No. There are codes that regulates the amount of natural light that are entering a space within a living area, a space that people live, that people engage with their families, that people utilize. Typically, an electrical room might not need windows because you are not using the electrical room every day, and you are not living in the electrical room. You're not living in a 2x2 space or a 3x3 space. But if you are in an open family room, you want to make sure you have natural light. You want to make sure that you have access to, the sun. It just helps, not just your health, but also your production and how you kind of function within the space. So the code regulates the amount of natural light that enter a space. For example, let's look at a simple image here. So this is a floor plan. Let's say just a typical basement in New England. And if you don't know what a floor plan is, we have a video in our playlist that talks about what a floor plan is, an elevation. So make sure you go back to those videos so you get familiar with the topics and the concepts of these things. So we have a typical basement layout here in New England. I'm missing the stairs here and, exits and stuff like that, but we're not gonna focus about those. We're gonna focus about the windows and the natural light requirements within that space. So let's say the code says 8% of the area that is livable are required to have 8% of the area is the total that are required for natural light within the space. And what does that mean in the code? You can look at the International Residential Code for these numbers that apply to you and your, your specific locations and things like that. So let's imagine it's 8%. So what does that mean in plan? Let's say a bathroom, you're not really living in it. So that is discard, but you are living in this area 1, and that area is 500 square feet. 500 square feet. So, I have 500 square feet, and the code says, oh, you are required to have 8% for natural light for that space. So what does that mean? If you have a window that is 4 by 4, that equals 16 square feet of area, or area that allows natural to penetrate a space. And when you say, okay, you know what? If I add 4 of those, my requirement is 8% of 500, which equals 40 square feet. If I have 4 windows, I have more than the minimum requirement of that space for natural light, which are, you could say 16, 16, 32. You could even use only 3 windows and then you comply. But maybe you want to have, a window in each end, and maybe you can have a fireplace in between those windows. So you actually are using the windows as a design feature, but at the same time, you are complying with the minimum natural light requirement of that particular space. Now, let's look at another example. If you have an area that is 1,000 square feet, and then you realize, oh, it's the same type of window. Let's say it's window A, and that window A is 16 square feet. Let's use a different color. 16 square feet. You're like, oh, my requirement of 8% of natural light minimum equals to 80 square feet. You're like, okay, well, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 windows. Yeah, that doesn't reach my 80%. Oh my God, I need to put another window. What does that tell you as a designer and as your, a homeowner? You're like, maybe what we could do is maybe we do 2 sets of windows. Maybe we do window, 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 And now you are duplicating the amount of natural light that to meet that requirement within that space. Or you can say, I might do a bedroom in here. Maybe you can say, what? I'm thinking about doing a bedroom in there. So what if we use, we have a bedroom in here. Now that area is much smaller. Let's say you have, you have, let's say 200 square feet of area. Now my minimum requirement, if we just take 10%, that's 20 square feet. You could have window and window. And now you comply with that, that requirement on that room. Also pay attention to egress and those kind of things, regarding windows. We talk about the types of windows in the previous video, so pay attention to also the requirements in terms of egress and how they relate to the window size, and how you can maneuver it outside the space. So very important that you pay attention to these numbers and how windows you need to meet that minimum requirement. Also, another thing that you could potentially do, sorry, I keep going back and forth, is, if you don't have enough windows, you can increase the size of your window to make sure you gain, that minimum requirement. You can say instead of a 4 by 4, maybe I do a 5 by 5. That will give me 25 square feet of natural light within that space. So very important. This is a lot of information, but we want to make sure that we talk about this topic so people are familiar and they understand that we're not just placing windows here and there without any logic. You have requirements that you need to comply. Very important. And lastly, how windows influence the space are, one of those topics that we briefly discussed with the previous videos talking about the importance of windows. Windows are very important to kind of create spaces, and get familiar with, the type of window that you want to utilize. I was talking to my wife the other day, like, hey, sweetheart, like right now we have like 3 panels that are fixed panels in the kitchen, and eventually we want to create like an addition at the back. And I was telling her like, hey, maybe what we do is instead of having 3 fixed panels, we do 1 panel that actually can be open to the exterior. So when we have, Easter, we can bring food from the kitchen into that deck that we have at the back. So, windows can create spaces and can engage people within what you are, within your area or within your house. So it's very important that you really analyze, how you use the space and how windows can influence, that interaction within your area. So within your building, your house, your commercial space. So very important topics. I hope that this video was helpful. We are trying here at Flow to make sure that we talk about topics that we know that people could use in their future investments and things like that. So thanks again for watching. Until the next one.
Welcome to Flow Design Architects, a company that works with you for you. Thank you for watching.